Hello, welcome to Creativity Boost Podcast. Have you ever felt like an impostor at your job, at your business, or even in your family? Have you ever felt like you were given a task and you felt incomplete, you felt incompetent, even though people outside or people around you think you're fit for the job or you're fit for the task or you have what it takes, but you somehow do not believe you have what it takes. And so you keep doubting yourself, you keep second guessing yourself, and sometimes that thought even leads you to not delivering on that task or to failing completely. And it has become like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You feel like you are in a loop of whenever you try to do something, you always doubt yourself, and whenever you doubt yourself, you always fail, and then rinse and repeat. Well, today that ends, because today we're going to be talking about how to break free from imposter syndrome and self-doubt today. I have on the show a repeat guest. He goes by the name Terry Tucker. The last time he came with guns blazing, and I believe that today he's not going to spare anyone or leave any stone unturned. So I'm going to bring him up today, and he's going to tell us a bit about himself, and we are going to get this party started. Hi, Terry. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself? It's so good to see you.
Radafi, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you again. I had such fun the last time, and hopefully we provided value to your audience. So sure, a little bit of background of me. I was born on the south side of Chicago, one of the larger cities here in the United States. I'm the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall. I actually went to college on a basketball scholarship despite having 3 knee surgeries in high school. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. Fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, a fast food chain. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. After Wendy's, I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother. I think they did such a great job that I wanted to be part of that organization. And then at 37, I became a police officer. One of the tasks that I did in my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT hostage negotiator. After that, I started a school security consulting business. I coached girls' high school basketball. But for the last 13 years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer, a rare form of melanoma.
Wow, thank you so much, Terry. Your story is so compelling, and every time you tell that story, I can't help but, feel the connection there. And I believe the same goes for those who are listening. So thank you for coming on the show, and we're going to get right into it. I like the fact that you gave us a brief history, and I see in your history and in your experience, you may have found yourself in scenarios where you probably would have had to battle with imposter syndrome or even self-doubt. And so I want you to bring us into that conversation and help us really understand what imposter syndrome is and what is the biggest cause of self-doubt in most people today.
That's a great question. I'll just go back to the very first time I ever had that experience. I was 6'5" when I was 13 years old. And I remember going to a basketball camp. And I was playing, they had put me, because I was taller, with the older boys, the high school boys, not the middle school boys.
Wow.
And when it came time at the end of the camp to do some of the different competitions, free throw shooting or 3-point shooting and things like that, they gave me a choice. Do you want to choose to be with the younger players, or do you want to choose to be with the older players where you'd been? And I chose to be with the younger players because I thought, well, I could beat them and I'll win these competitions. But I lost the free throw shooting contest. And one of the coaches pulled me aside and he said, Terry, you've played with the older boys the entire week. Why did you choose to go with the younger players for these competitions? And I said, well, in all honesty, I thought I could win. And he said, Well, I was 13 years old. I was a kid. I didn't understand what was going on. But
Yeah.
the bottom line was he said something to me that I thought was incredibly important. He said, I'm pretty sure that if you would have competed with the older boys that you had been competing with all week, you probably would have won the free throw shooting contest with them. Because when we compete against people that are better than us, even if that person is us, we elevate our game.
Yeah.
If you play against people that are not that good, you're gonna lower yourself to their level. Whereas if you play against people or compete against people that are better than you, you're gonna rise to the level that they are. And I thought that was something at 13 that was very important to me. I think imposter syndrome, we all have it. And I don't care how good or great or wonderful you are at something. From time to time, you're going to doubt yourself. Do I have what it takes? And I'll tell you a quick story. I was on a podcast with a gentleman who played in the National Football League here in the U.S. I know different parts of the world, football is soccer. For here in the U.S., it's American football. So this guy was like 6'8", like 310 pounds. He played for several professional teams, and we did the podcast, and we were talking afterwards. And he said, Terry, when I started my podcast, I didn't think anybody would pay attention to me. I didn't think anybody would care what I had to say. And I said, Marcus, how could you say that? You've made it to the top, to the pinnacle of your sport, and yet you don't feel that you're good enough? So the people that are listening to us right now, if you ever think that you can't do something or you have that imposter syndrome, understand that even professional athletes who've made it to the top, singers, performers, politicians, business people, all of us from time to time think that we're inadequate. And I think a lot of it has to do with fear. We're afraid that we might fail at what we're going to try.
Absolutely. And you made a mention of something that really sparked a thought in my mind, because this imposter syndrome and self-doubt actually come from that tiny little voice that most times whispers in your ears. I call it the inner critic. And this inner critic always reminds you of why you may not be sufficient or you may be inadequate to fulfill a particular task or to succeed in a particular endeavor. And so it behooves us, the onus is on us to silence that voice or banish that voice, because that voice would always come. Now it's about how do you respond when that voice comes? How do you keep that voice quiet? How do you numb that voice and make it look like that voice does not exist because of how you build your mentality? So I want us to begin to unpack the right mentality that we should have to be able to put imposter syndrome to bed for good. Can you take us through that journey, Terry?
Sure. I think one of the biggest things you've got to do is think about sort of the end game. What would be the worst thing that could possibly happen? Okay, you go up on that stage, say you're giving a talk, and you bomb, and you die. And I'll give you a story, because this happened to me. And I had just started at Wendy's when I was out of college. And I get a call from the secretary, they had secretaries back then, to the senior vice president of marketing. And she said, Bill would like you he would like to see you. Now, Bill Welter was the senior vice president. I'd never been to Bill's office. I mean, that was like going to the ivory tower. And so I walked down the hall, and when I get there, his secretary is standing there with a binder. And she said, Terry, Bill is supposed to give a talk, a speech, to a group of bankers at a luncheon in downtown Columbus, but he's tied up, and he asked if you would give the talk. Now, this is like 11 o'clock. The talk is at noon. Wow. She hands me the binder, which contains his speech, gives me the address to the hotel where it is, and says, if you leave now, you should be able to make it just in time to give the talk. I had never seen this speech. I had never even read it once, let alone practiced it. I totally bombed that speech.
Wow.
And I felt like an idiot. But then I also felt, well, it was good practice. Yes, I learned from this. I'll never do that again. I will never. But, it was my boss. My boss was saying, here, go do this. Okay, I'll go do it. And I bombed. But you know what? The sun came up the next day. And nobody died, and there were, it was nothing horrible happened. in life. So understand the end game. What's the worst thing that can happen? And if you can live with the worst thing that can happen, then what do you have to lose in your life? I heard it said one time that if you're scared of doing something, the best way to get over it is to do that thing 100 times. Go do that thing 100 times, and you will overcome your fear. Why do we practice our speeches when, before we get up on stage? Why don't we just write it out and go do it? We practice it because we get good at it. So give yourself that time, give yourself that ability to be successful, and then understand what's the worst thing that could possibly happen. If you can live with that, then go ahead and do it.
Great thought. Now, let's narrow this down to the concept of creativity, because the goal of this show is to help listeners go from idea to increased income and go from concept to cash flow by turning their gifts, skills, talents, and ideas into tangible solutions and profitable solutions, right? But most people who can become creative by actually expressing these gifts they have, they never actually go on to become creative. So we have millions and even billions of people going to their grave in droves with their brain children in the womb of their mind. Some even abort these brain children halfway before they even take it to their grave, right? So contextualizing our conversation to creatives who are in this journey of expressing their hidden gifts, skills, talent, and potential, and one of the biggest roadblocks stopping them is this imposter syndrome. What would you say to them? There are many people who would rather allow their genius sleep within them or die within them than give it a shot because of the thought of what if it does not work? Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe nobody will listen to me. Maybe this is not for people with my skin pigmentation or from my geographic extraction. Maybe people who talk like me can achieve this feat. Maybe I shouldn't even bother. In fact, before I release you to answer this question, I'll tell a quick story. The men who invented the airplane, Orville and Wilbur Wright, when they began the experiments to see that they could, get an airplane to fly, it failed several times. And even their dad told them if God wanted men to fly, he would have created them with wings on their back. But these men went ahead anyway. Why? Because they believed. They had a strong, persuasive belief that they had what it took to do it. So if you listening to us have this kind of strong, stubborn faith and belief in your capacity and in your ability, there's so much you can do. But imposter syndrome is something that needs to be taken care of first. So that brings me to the question, Terry. How can one on this journey of expressing his creative gift, skill, and talent deal with imposter syndrome, given the landscape we find ourselves today, where people are, conditioned to compare themselves on social media and whatnot? I can go on and on, but I'll just release you to go with the answers to this question.
Sure. And you said a couple things there that I found interesting. I've heard the same thing, that it's been said that some of the richest real estate in the world are our cemeteries, because they're areas rich in businesses never started, books never written, and relationships never pursued. At the end of your life, when you go to the cemetery, don't have those regrets. Don't have those things that, gee, I wish I would have asked that person out, or I wish I would have written that book. I heard a statistic once that said 83% of Americans believe they have a book inside them.
Absolutely.
And yet less than 1% of those people will ever write that book. The rest are going to go to the cemetery with that regret. So don't have those regrets. So how do you do that? And I think one of the biggest things you do, and you mentioned the word, and you talk, the word is giving. You've got to be able to do this. You've got to be able to give of yourself to other people. You're right. Social media allows us to stay on the surface. And there's a professor at the University of Chicago, a psychology professor, who does this experiment with his students. He makes them go out and get on a bus, and in 3 questions, be deep with someone. So you get on a bus, sit down next to somebody. Hey, how you doing? I'm fine. How are you? Question 1. And I'm just making this up. Question 2, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a doctor. Okay. Question 3, have you always wanted to be a doctor? And it doesn't matter what they say. They could say, no, I grew up on a farm and I wanted to be a veterinarian, but X, Y, and Z happened. Or my mother was a doctor and she died of breast cancer at 40, so I'm honoring her memory by becoming a doctor. Whatever they tell you, now they're telling you their why. If you understand people's why, their purpose, their mission in life, you can use your creativity to make their lives better. So understand the mission that other people have, use your God-given gifts and talents, and make their lives better. You'll have an amazing life.
So what is creativity and how does it relate to imposter syndrome? How does it relate to self-doubt?
That's a great question. What is creativity? What, when I was younger, I used to think I'm not creative at all. I'm not creative at all. And yet I've written 2 books, a chapter in another book. I write a weekly blog. How can I not be creative? But again, it's what are you telling yourself? You have unique gifts and talents. Maybe you can talk. Maybe you can write. Maybe you're great at tinkering with things, engines, or with your hands, whatever. What are your gifts and talents? And then think bigger. I always tell my daughter, whatever idea you have, think bigger. Take that idea and bigger, because we tend to keep our ideas, our creativity small because it's safe. If we don't kind of step outside the box, it's safe. We can live with that. But what if we could step out the box? What if we could say, what if I could do that? What if it was possible for me to do this instead of doing this? How much happier would I be, and how much better would the world be for the things that I'm putting into it with my unique gifts and talents?
Wow. So there's one thing that sponsors imposter syndrome and self-doubt, and that is past failures. And you mentioned one of your experiences where you actually went and you bombed, the speech you were giving. That was like, in quote, a failure, although I like to see it as feedback. And I believe that's the same for you. But most people, they allow past failures to cause them to think less of themselves and to just bury their gift and say, well, maybe it's not worth it. Maybe I should just blend with the crowd. Maybe I should go with the flow and not try to be different, because every time I try to stand out, I fall down flat on my face. So this is a valid concern. And most people have gone through this. There are people who have even gone ahead to take their lives because of such kinds of experience. So what would you say to someone listening to us right now who is at that crossroads of either giving up or ending it all due to a recent past failure or a present failure?
I would say this: find meaning in your misery. There is a reason that you failed. There is a lesson that you're supposed to learn. When bad things happen in life, I don't believe these things just happen. I believe we're supposed to learn a lesson. But like you say, so many people are like, oh, I failed, so I'm a failure. You're not a failure unless you start blaming someone else for the times that you failed in life. What you should do with your failures is learn from them. What was this supposed to teach me? What was going up in front of those bankers and giving a speech that I'd never seen before in my life and totally bombing supposed to teach me? That was supposed to teach me. What was getting cancer supposed to teach me? There's some reason, there's some value in failing. I mean, if we succeeded all the time, we wouldn't try that hard. So why not take the lesson you're supposed to learn and apply it to another venture, another business, another creative something that you're supposed to do? I love the quote from Nelson Mandela, the former president of South Africa, who said, "I never lose. I either learn or I win." So I love that quote. It's like, yeah, I made a mistake. I failed. I didn't get what I wanted. What did you learn from that? I learned this. Now, how do you apply what you learned to making something more creative, to thinking bigger, to thinking outside the box with the knowledge that you didn't have before you failed that, whatever it was you were doing?
So talking about imposter syndrome, let's bring it to the career space, because there are some creatives who have an assignment in the professional world. And in fact, this is one space where you will be amazed to see a lot of people battling with imposter syndrome. Someone can go to school and have the best degrees and learn even up to a PhD and still have imposter syndrome. While we have those who have imposter syndrome despite their promotion, while there are those who are perfectionists, and because that perfectionism is a reality that they seem to never attain, despite the fact that they want to be perfect, they keep telling themselves they're not good enough. But people outside are telling themselves, well, you're crushing it, you're doing great, right? And, I want you to speak to that in the career space and tell us what this problem is all about, what is the cause of this problem, and how it can be overcome for anyone who may be in that bubble right now.
I would say the biggest cause is fear. We're afraid of something. We're afraid of somebody finding out we're not nearly as good as we think we are. We're afraid of bombing that talk that we're supposed to give. We're afraid of going in and making that presentation to get funding for the new business we want to start. And we're afraid of failing. So we hold back. We think small. And if you look at people in life that are successful, they think big. You've got to think bigger. And that's why, like I say, I've always said to our daughter, think bigger. You got a good idea? Think bigger. How can you make that idea bigger? And yes, is it scary? Sure it is. And are you going to fail from time to time? Absolutely. But here's what I would tell you. Nobody ever is successful in a vacuum. That they're the only person that's doing this. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the most successful singer, athlete, business person. There are people that got you to that point, which I think lends us to say, well, then maybe we need to surround ourselves with good people. And let me say this, and if people remember nothing else I say for the rest of this podcast, remember this. I think this is incredibly important. It's more important who you work with and who you work for than it is the work that you do. Find people that care about you. Find people that are willing to invest in you. Find people that want to see you succeed. Hitch your wagon to those people and climb your mountains together. So surround yourself with good people. If you surround yourself with good people, they will lift you up. They will also tell you the truth. They will tell you, hey, Terry, I don't think you should do that. I think that's something that's not good for you. That wouldn't be. But what do we do when people tell us what we don't want to hear? We ostracize them. It's like, no, get out of my life. Get out of my life. No, you need those people in your life that love you enough that they're willing to tell you the truth, even if it impacts the relationship that the two of you have.
Wow, awesome. So what about people who are in an environment that's toxic, where no matter how good they are, people keep telling them you're not good enough, keep putting them down, and keep causing them to feel less of themselves and to not aspire higher? For example, you talk about how you tell your daughter to think bigger, right? There are people who tell people who have big aspirations to think smaller. Say, hey, who do you think you are that you can be this big or that you can be this successful? Maybe you should think smaller. Maybe you're too ambitious. Maybe you're thinking too big of yourself or thinking too highly of yourself. So how do you manage that if you're a creative and maybe your spouse is not in alignment with the weight of your vision or with the greatness of your ambition within reason? What would you say to that?
That's a great question, and I can tell you a story that actually I experienced that. I felt my job in life, my purpose in life, my mission was to be in law enforcement, was to be a police officer. But my dad's father, my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, had been a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. And in 1933, he was shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle. But my dad, who was an infant at the time, grew up with the stories that my grandmother told of that knock on the door of Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us, your husband's been shot. So when I expressed an interest in doing the thing that I felt I was supposed to do, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to college. You're going to major in business. You're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. My dad had my whole life planned out, but it was the life my dad wanted me to live. It wasn't the life I felt I was supposed to live. So as I mentioned, I had a choice. When I graduated from college, my father and my grandmother were dying of cancer. I could have said, hey, Dad, I know you're dying. Sorry about that. I'm going to go do my own thing. I'm going to go blaze my own trail in law enforcement. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. Knowing that he was dying, my first 2 jobs were in business. And I kind of joke. I did what every good son did. I waited until my father passed away, and then I followed my own dreams. But let me say this, and I'm proud of some things in my life, but the thing I'm most proud of is that I never let my dream die. I mean, I was 37 years old when I got into law enforcement, which is pretty old to be getting into that line of work. But I never let the dream die. I knew I was going to do it. I knew I was going to do it at some point in time, but it was, when was that going to be? And you're absolutely right. A lot of times it's family members. My dad did what he did, not to hurt me, but because he loved me and he thought he wanted something that was better for me. The problem was my dad wasn't living my life. I had to live my life. So I'm sure there's family members, people out there listening to us that want to do things. And you're right. They're telling them, oh, think smaller. You're too ambitious. You can't do that. That's hard to get away from that. But if there are people that are not supporting you, that are not uplifting you, that don't want to see you succeed, you need to find a way to distance yourself from those people and get with people that do care about you, that do want to invest in you, that do want to see you succeed. It's not easy, especially when they're family members. But if they're not family members and they're friends, you need to find better friends, because you're not going to succeed with people that are constantly putting you down.
Yeah, and I want us to drill down this family member talk a little more, because for someone listening, well, I don't have the time to wait till my spouse passes on before I pursue my dream, right? Maybe for my parent, I could be patient. I could be more patient out of love and respect for them. But for my spouse, we are practically about the same age and we'll grow old together. So what do I do in that situation?
That's a great question. And I don't think there's if I could give you a snap answer and like, here it is, I think you need to talk to each other. It's like, honey, I love you, but this is my dream. This is something I want. I mean, when my wife married me, I was a suit and tie 8 to 5 hospital administrator. And I went to her and I said at dinner one night, look, I want to be in law enforcement. I want to be a police officer. Will you support me? And she said, yes. She said, go do it. Go take the class. See if you like it. And I used to work. I started out as a reserve officer, and I would work all week at my regular job. And then I would come home Friday night, put on my uniform and go to roll call and work all Friday night and come home at 7:00 Saturday morning after being a police officer. And she tells the story better than I do. She said, you would come in to the house and you would be exhausted, but you had this big smile on your face.
Wow.
And she was like, I knew that was what you were supposed to do. And she supported me. If your spouse doesn't support you, I don't know what to tell you. Talk to them. Honestly, I don't, I mean, you could try to make it work, or you could, it's got to be a discussion. It's got to be something that the two of you, especially when you're married, there's a reason it says in the Bible, the two shall be as one. You are one now. You've got to support each other. You've got to love each other. You got to care for each other all the time. And sometimes that's hard. I mean, I would go out to work at night at 11 o'clock at night. My wife would go to bed. You can't tell me she didn't lay there some nights thinking, I hope he's okay. I hope he's safe.
Yeah.
So you got to support each other. And that's not an easy question. And I don't have a good answer for you.
You actually gave a good answer. And I think it's a dicey one. It's a tricky one. But your answer was right on point. And that brings me to my final question. If there was one thing you could say to someone right now who's battling with imposter syndrome to help that person break free from self-doubt and imposter syndrome today, what would it be?
I'm going to give you two things. I would tell you that whatever you're afraid of, do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them. And the second thing I'm going to tell you comes from a book called Farewell to Arms. It was written by a man by the name of, whose name just went right out of my head, Ernest Hemingway. Thank you for a minute. Ernest Hemingway wrote this great book, and Hemingway was one of our greatest authors, Farewell to Arms. And it's kind of a semi-autobiographical account of his time as an ambulance driver for the Italian army during World War I. And there's a line in the book that I absolutely love. And the line is this: life breaks everyone. And afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. So if you're scared to do something and you try it and you fail and it breaks you, keep going. Keep moving forward, because you will come out the other end a stronger and more determined individual. It'll be based on what you learn, but it'll also be based on the things that are going on around you, with the people you're surrounding yourself and things like that. So understand that we're all going to fail from time to time, but it's a matter of, can you keep moving forward and learning from those failures, or do you shut down and say, you know what? No, I'm not doing this anymore. I promise you, if you have just this much grit in your life, you can do almost anything, because so many people just quit, give up, never even look for their purpose in life, let alone find it and live it.
Wow, that was a blockbuster. Thank you so much, Terry. You came with guns blazing as I anticipated, and I believe you listening on the other side, you found great value in listening to this conversation. And if that's the case, of course I believe it is, I encourage you to share and drop some comment in the comment section on whatever platform you're listening to this, and share this with someone right now who you think is battling with imposter syndrome, or who has had to battle with imposter syndrome sometime in the past, and they'll be grateful you did that, because you'll be helping them overcome self-doubt and imposter syndrome today. So on this note, I'm going to draw the curtain. I'll see you on my next episode. Till then, have a good one, and bye-bye.